Hey all, here OS Reviews. You're watching our video review of the Huawei Honor 7X. In the blink of an eye, 2018 is coming to its tail end, and the 7X, which was once a new device a few months ago, is now almost a year old. So is it still a compelling device to pick up? Well, first of all, the street price has now fallen to about $150, so about $50 cheaper than the $200 retail that we saw at the start of 2018. In many ways, it remains an excellent value because phones have been released since then, namely by Xiaomi and the Redmi series, including the Mi A2 Lite, also known as the Redmi 6 Pro, still uses a Snapdragon 625, which is actually about the same as the Kirin 659 that is powering the 7X. So in terms of benchmarks and raw performance, you're still getting a fairly up-to-date device as far as budget, mid-end smartphones are concerned. So taking a quick look at the design first, again, this is a beautifully crafted phone from Huawei and Honor. It's made entirely out of aluminum with these chamfered edges. It does use a micro USB port for charging, however, as opposed to USB Type-C, which is starting to show its age a little bit, but still is similar to what Xiaomi is doing on their devices as well. On the rear, you do have access to a dual camera setup, which is, again, one of the more compelling features of the 7X, especially when it was new. It allows you to create bokeh shots and features a 16-megapixel primary sensor coupled with a 2-megapixel depth sensor. There's also a biometric fingerprint scanner, and it came with either 3 or 4 gigabytes of built-in RAM. The display on the front measures 6 inches diagonally, and it's a full HD plus panel, so 1080p resolution, and you can tell that it doesn't have a chin on the top, which is a design that I think many folks would still prefer today. It doesn't take up any screen real estate, looks very elegant, but leaves fairly small chins on the top and the bottom of the device, and overall it's a very symmetrical look that gives you an immersive video watching and video consumption experience. Since the past few months, we've reviewed the Huawei Mate 10 Pro, which is Huawei's flagship device, and it has a very similar overall kind of feel in the hand, also has the same display size, but that one has an AMOLED panel as opposed to the IPS LCD. Still, it offers very generous and wide viewing angles, as you can see here. It also gets plenty bright, so I think for the average consumer watching videos, consuming media, browsing the web is still going to be a joy on this device. Now, taking a closer look at the software next, the Honor 7X, of course, uses EMUI, or Emotion UI, and that is Huawei's proprietary skin on top of Android. This particular version is meant for the Chinese market, which is why you see some ads and some videos and news articles in Chinese, but the overall experience is quite similar to the global ROM that you see. By default, EMUI didn't come with a app tray or an app drawer like on stock Google devices, but you can always bring that feature back by digging deeper into the settings. And you saw previously there's a left screen, which is basically your news feed and articles. I can also long hold to have access to things like Google Assistant if I want to do some quick voice search commands. Multitasking also is quite smooth, again with either 3 or 4 gigs of RAM. Still remains quite competitive as a sub $200 phone in that regard. Otherwise, the phone packs a 3,340 mAh capacity battery, which is sufficient in our testing to get you through at least a day of use, if not a day and a half. The Kirin 659 seems to do all right when it comes to optimizing for battery performance. And classic elements of EMUI include a blue drag-down notification tray that allows you to change and tweak things like Wi-Fi, screen brightness, there's GPS, there's Bluetooth. It supports 4G LTE bands here in the United States as well, which is great. What it doesn't have, though, is wireless charging, again, because it is using a unibody aluminum build, which feels great, but it's harder for that reception to pass through, and there's also no NFC on this particular phone either, so no mobile payment. There's also universal search, as you can see, through a pull-down gesture, which works quite well. Again, tricks within EMUI that we do quite enjoy, and we've covered extensively in previous videos. Overall, I would say that EMUI is a fairly complete skin or launcher on top of Android. Sure, it's not going to be everyone's cup of tea. I would still prefer something like Android One, for instance, or just stock Android in general, but out of the skins that are on the market, I would say it does a fairly decent job. One unique feature I found in the Chinese version of the phone is there is instant translation by form of the QR scanner that's next to the universal search. So you can tap on that and it instantly translates words that it sees into other languages, which I did think was kind of cool. And because Google services are banned in China, this particular phone is actually using Baidu services, which is the equivalent of Google but for the Chinese demographic. Otherwise, the phone does have a fair amount of bloatware. Some of them are installed by the manufacturer, again, depending on the region you're in. It is typically sold as an unlocked phone, however, so it doesn't come with a carrier subsidization. All the other tricks that we saw with the more expensive Mate 10 Pro remain, such as double tap to wake, and you can also double press on the volume key to launch into the camera for an instant shot, which works quite well. So speaking of the camera, taking a closer look at the interface here, again, it's very similar to what we saw with the Mate 10 Pro, which is a good thing. The interface is simple and straightforward and gives us access to various menus, things like bokeh effect, changing into the auto HDR. We can also create a moving image, and of course I can tweak it into the Pro mode if I want to change things like aperture, ISO, and all of those fine details. It is a very complete software experience on a low-cost phone. So a distinction I want to make right now is Honor is kind of a sub-brand of Huawei. Originally it started off as a web brand for devices sold exclusively online, similar to OnePlus, for instance, and Oppo, whereas the Huawei is kind of the more exclusive brand that you can find in stores, and the pricing is a little higher. Features tend to be slightly more advanced as well before they come to Honor a few months later. As you can see from the image quality here, especially outdoors with the sufficient lighting, the quality is really excellent. It's bright, it's saturated with plenty of detail, and you can see that close-up shots of food, for instance, aren't shabby at all either. So again, very impressive image quality as a whole for a low-cost phone. So taking a look at the web browsing performance next, first of all, here's the default keyboard. It feels quite spacious and comfortable to use. The touchscreen, again, is lucid. It supports up to 5 fingers for multi-touch and has slight 2.5D curved glass on edges, which again makes gestures and swiping between screens feel fairly smooth. It also supports things like swipe if you want to very quickly drag across a character to type it in. The browser we are using here is designed by Huawei, and it loads up most desktop class sites without any issues, including the New York Times, including CNET, including YouTube. So it's a pretty powerful browser that doesn't really slow down too much, but again, you do need to maybe wait a split second longer compared to a more expensive flagship phone, but again, those devices will probably be 2 or 3 times the price of this one. One interesting thing about the browser is there's also a night mode that basically inverts the text and tries to kind of dim the background as well, making it a little easier on your eyes. You can also turn on a filter mode that will decrease the blue light and what's kind of harmful for your eyes, so it helps you fall asleep faster and dims the display's brightness as well to make it more comfortable when you're reading things in bed. Digging into settings, we can check out some additional gestures and features on this phone, and there is a one-handed UI mode. Now these features are pretty typical of most EMUI phones that we've been seeing, but you can swipe between the virtual keys on the bottom of the device to have access to a smaller screen for one-handed use. Again, maybe 6 inches is a little on the large side for some folks, so that's something to keep in mind, but you have access to this gesture if you want to make it a little easier. Motion controls include flipping the phone over to mute a call, or using 3 fingers to capture a screenshot are also on here. We've seen that already on other phones in the past, but it's nice to see them on a low-cost device as well, that the software isn't skimped out on. You still have access to all of these features if you want to use them. There's also a simple mode, which is used for conserving battery power and also meant for the elderly or for kids to use. It simplifies the UI just to make it a little easier to understand. Again, the biggest competitor of the Honor 7X was always going to be other low-cost phones, maybe by Motorola, as well as by Xiaomi in the same price bracket, and those phones are probably powered by a Snapdragon, like the Snapdragon 625. And again, the performance of both are relatively similar. They're both octa-core chipsets, are both very energy efficient, and some people have pointed out the Kirin 659 does have some occasional jumpiness. It's not quite as consistent. Sometimes, certain apps may lock up and maybe will crash out. I have encountered that a few times, 1 or 2 times, but it's not anything that cripples the experience at all. And oftentimes, if you reboot the phone, it becomes very fast again. You do have access to features like assisted touch, which gives you even more gestures. A lot of things, again, you can fine tweak from EMUI to your liking, but you can tell how overall navigation seems to be doing a fairly good job. Maybe some occasional drop frames, especially if you are gaming and then swiping back and forth, but otherwise it remains a fairly enjoyable experience. It plays back all the content in the Play Store without any issues. So that's more or less it as far as our review of the Honor 7X. I would say here, even at the tail end of 2018, it's a phone that's worth considering, especially as an unlocked device, because it still feels and looks and performs like a device that's more expensive than the price would suggest, especially now that it's about $50 cheaper, again, $150. I think it's a very good competitor to the likes of what Xiaomi is offering. Honor has done a very good job when it comes to giving you a slightly better build quality and excellent photography overall experience, especially in daylight environments, and overall a very great compelling all-in-one package that doesn't really leave too much to be desired from any end. So you can check out more details in the links down below, but that's been our video. Thanks for watching.